Okay, so thank you again. Welcome to the EAL You Saw the Need, Now Build the Skill, Explicit Instruction on Cohesive Devices. The learning intentions today are as follows. We're going to go through some activities to help us to understand how cohesive devices support language and academic success. We will explore some strategies for teaching cohesive devices explicitly across subject areas. We will learn scaffolding techniques for EAL learners at varying proficiency levels, and we'll analyze an example lesson embedding cohesive devices instruction. So before I continue moving forward here, I just wanted to make note that I'm hopeful that you don't all come into this session thinking that you need to do more. A lot of these strategies that I'm going to talk about today are things that you're already doing in your classes. This is just a way that we can be targeting some of the skills that are needed specific to cohesive devices. So these are not big things that need to be done. They are just targeting some things that we may want to be highlighting in our classes, because I know you're all doing amazing work already. And I also wanted to make note that cohesive device explicit instruction is good for all students, not just EAL students. So I hope you'll see that the value of these supports and scaffolds and explicit instruction are useful for all the students in your class. And the last thing I wanted to speak about too is that when we're speaking about cohesive devices, we're talking about it when students are speaking as well as when they're writing. So I'll be talking about strategies that are useful for modeling how students respond verbally, because as we know, our language develops more quickly verbally than it does in our writing. So again, modeling strategies and explicit teaching for speaking as well as for writing. So hopefully, even our grade 1 students who are maybe not writing yet, this will, anytime I'm speaking about cohesive devices, it's related to speaking as well. Okay, first of all, it's important for us to understand what are cohesive devices. So cohesive devices are words and phrases that link ideas together in writing and speech, creating flow and clarity. They include connectors, for example, however, therefore, pronouns, this, they, and reference words that help sentences relate to each other. These devices make text easier to understand and help learners express complex ideas logically. And why are they important? So using cohesive devices effectively supports language development by improving communication skills and helps students achieve academic success because most subjects require clear, connected explanations in writing and discussions. I also wanted to point out that we want to have high rigor for all of our students, including EAL students. And in order to participate in high academic rigor in school, students need to have a good understanding of cohesive devices and how to speak using them, and also how to communicate in their writing using them. So providing this skill to our students by explicitly teaching it to them opens a lot of opportunities for them and allows them to take place in those high rigor academic classes and continue their education further afterwards as well. So of course, we want to be setting up all of our students for success and allow them the opportunities to access those educational opportunities. So some resources here. These are resources that we created within our team. We have a cohesive device poster, and then we have a cohesive device teacher reference page. I did send an email with the link to the slides. So the link is live on the slides that I emailed out. I also put the link right in the email. And just so you know, after this session, I will be putting in the pony some color copies of both of these documents. So please look in your mailbox at your school in the next week or so for these resources that will I'll be putting in the pony for you, so you can use them in your class or reference them in your teacher planning. So the cohesive device poster is a student reference page. This is something you could put up in your classroom that students could refer to. It could be something that you have laminated that you could hand out when you're doing either speaking or writing activities. Just so you know how the poster works, it's split up into the different types of cohesive devices. And then on the far left-hand side would be the more basic level of cohesive devices, and it progresses to the right to the more complicated ones. So if you laminate this page, you could even just circle some of the cohesive devices that you're looking to target, so students wouldn't have, because that whole page is quite overwhelming for sure. And then the teacher page is, the words are just organized there. The underlined ones would be the beginner cohesive devices for LP1s and 2s. The bolded ones would be for our level 3s and 4s, and our italicized ones are our advanced ones. So this is something you could keep in your teacher planning book, that you could refer back to when needed. So again, look out for that in your coming to you and the pony in the next couple days or so as well. Okay, we're going to start here with a cohesive device hunt. So the job here is to read through the passage and think about the cohesive devices that are used. I'll read it out loud to you just in case maybe you can't see it well on your screen. And then you can just make note of the cohesive devices yourself, or if you feel comfortable, you could pop some into the chat. And then we'll discuss them afterwards. So I'll just read the passage so you can hear it in case you can't see it. Lions and tigers, both majestic big cats, share several similarities. However, they also exhibit distinct differences. Both species are apex predators, meaning they sit at the top of the food chain. Likewise, they possess powerful builds and sharp claws, which aid in hunting. Yet their social structures are quite different. Lions, known as the kings of the jungle, live in groups called prides, which consist of multiple females, their cubs, and a few males. In contrast, tigers are solitary animals, preferring to hunt and live alone. Although they share a common ancestry, their behaviors and habits have diverged significantly. Despite these differences, lions and tigers are both crucial to their respective ecosystems. Therefore, understanding their unique characteristics helps in the conservation efforts for these magnificent creatures. So there you go. I'll give you just a little time here to think about the cohesive devices that you see. So again, we're looking at connecting words, pronouns, and reference words that help sentences relate to each other. And I've got the answer key on the next slide here, so I'll just give you a few more seconds. Okay, so here we go. We have the same passage here. And you'll see that some of the cohesive devices are now highlighted in yellow in the paragraph. So for example, the first one we see there, lions and tigers, both majestic cats, share several similarities. And so the word both is highlighted. Both is a cohesive device. It's a comparison cohesive device. And then we have, however, they also exhibit distinct differences. So however is also a cohesive device, and it's a contrast cohesive device. You can see they're both, likewise, yet, in contrast, although, despite, both again, and then therefore are also highlighted there. So when you read the passage, you can see that including the cohesive devices links all the ideas together well. It also provides some academic language throughout that brings up the level of this piece of writing. So now that we're aware of what cohesive device is, I thought we could just do a little comparison between some different subject areas, some writing, but these are also things that students could say. And then on the other side here, we have the when cohesive devices are used. So on the left, student didn't use cohesive devices, and on the right would be by adding them. So for ELAL, sorry, I went to the park, I saw trees, I saw birds, I sat on a bench, I ate a snack, I looked at the sky, I went home. In contrast, when cohesive devices are used, I'll read that one out for you. Yesterday, I went to the park because the weather was beautiful. First, I noticed the tall trees and the birds flying above. After that, I sat on a bench and ate a snack. While I was eating, I looked at the bright blue sky. Finally, I went home feeling happy. So such a good contrast there between on the left there, it's very fragmented and just like single ideas separated by periods, not a lot of cohesion in the writing. Whereas on the right, you can see there, it paints such a better picture of what is happening in that story that was written. So we'll now look at the science example. Water evaporates, water goes into the air, clouds form, rain falls, water goes back to rivers and lakes. So no cohesive devices there. Conversely, on the other side, water evaporates when the sun heats it. Then the water vapor rises into the air, where clouds begin to form. After that, rain falls from the clouds, and finally, the water returns to rivers and lakes, completing the cycle. So again, it's much easier to picture the water cycle when we use the cohesive devices because there's lots of words that describe what is happening there. Lastly, we'll look at a social studies example. The Nile River was important. People farmed near the river. Crops grew. People built homes. People traded goods. The Nile River was important because it provided water for farming. As a result, people settled near the river and crops grew well. In addition, they built homes close to the water, which made trade easier. So again, we can see the differences between the two there. I think it's really important to note once we look at this that possibly a student would start by writing the way we see on the left, and they would need explicit instruction, modeling, assistance, scaffolds in order to get their writing to where it is, writing or speaking, get it to where it is on the right. And so that's what we're going to continue on with here, some things that we can do to encourage this use of cohesive devices. So we're going to look at 6 strategies today. The first one, show and tell. Second, a shared word bank. Third, practice in small steps. Fourth, make it active. And fifth, visual tools. And then lastly, feedback. So we'll go through each of these separately now. So the first one we have is show and tell. So what to do? When we are showing and telling cohesive devices, we use you would use real life examples from your subject. Point out connectors and linking words. An example in science would be plants need sunlight because they make food through photosynthesis. You could highlight or underline the word because as the connector. Say you are writing notes on the board or student reads a sentence aloud. You could just highlight it and say, oh, this was a great connector word used to bring these two ideas together. And why does show and tell work? It makes cohesive devices visible and meaningful, and it helps students see how ideas connect in authentic texts. Our second strategy is the shared word bank. Create a list of common cohesive devices for all classes. So again, I've put the example here of the one that we have created. And these cohesive devices would be appropriate for all classes, all subject areas, all grade levels, so they could be used throughout. Like I mentioned before, this page has a lot on it and there's a varying degree of them. So it would be useful for sure to highlight a few that you're targeting at a time, because if a student sees this whole page, that's going to be very difficult for them. But yeah, you could use it however you chose fit in your class. And why does the shared work bank work? It gives students a resource that they can refer to, and it also reinforces use of cohesive devices across all subject areas. So if a student sees this in EAL, but they also see it in science, they're more likely to use it more frequently. The next strategy here is to practice in small steps. So what to do here, you would start with short sentences and then build complexity. Give sentence starters and sentence frames to model using cohesive devices. So for example, if a student writes, the volcano erupted, people ran away, you could then give the students the sentence frame and ask them to combine the two sentences. So again, the only support that you've provided here is kind of like a blank and then put so in the middle and then a blank, and see if the student could combine the volcano erupted, so people ran away. And they now have had explicit instructions on using the word so, which is a great cohesive device. And why does this work? It breaks down the skill in manageable chunks. It also provides support using cohesive devices. So sentence frames would be a scaffold that we could provide for all of our students to help them start using more cohesive devices effectively. Moving on to number 4, which is make it active. So what to do, color code connectors in text, combine sentences using words like because, however, therefore, and then fill in missing connectors. So kind of a fill in the blank situation. So an example here could be sentence combining race. Give students short sentences and cohesive devices. Challenge them to combine them using at least 2 cohesive devices. So why does it work to make it active? Instead of passively reading or listening, students interact with the text, highlighting, combining, filling gaps, and discussing. This hands-on approach makes learning more memorable. Number 5 here, we have visual tools. So what to do? You can use charts, diagrams, or concept maps to show how ideas connect. Encourage students to add cohesive devices when explaining links. So an example, a concept map for photosynthesis. So you can see here we have photosynthesis with an arrow, sunlight and carbon dioxide added together, then creates oxygen. So a student could then relate a specific cohesive device to a symbol. So we would of course know that a plus sign would be um, and then when we see an arrow, that would be as a result. So it creates or as a result. And so then when a student is speaking about photosynthesis, they could say photosynthesis needs sunlight and carbon dioxide. As a result, plants produce oxygen. So if they can link some symbols to some cohesive devices that go with those symbols, they would again be more likely able to use them in their classes. And so why do visual tools work? It makes connections visible and clear. It helps students organize ideas logically, and it engages visual learners and supports cross-subject understanding. And then lastly, we have feedback. So have students peer check for connectors in each other's writing. Ask them to reflect on how cohesive devices make writing clearer. An example would be a peer review checklist. Have a peer highlight connectors like because, however, therefore when they are editing. If there are none present, peers could work together to add some. And why does this work? It encourages collaboration and critical thinking. It helps students see the impact of cohesive devices on clarity, and it also builds editing and revision skills. So now that we've looked at the different strategies that could be used to help students become more proficient at using cohesive devices in their speaking and writing, we're now going to look briefly at some scaffolds that could be provided to some students or all students to help them. Knowing that our classes are becoming more diverse every day, most classes would likely have beginner EAL level 1 and 2 students in their class. For these students, you would focus on basic connectors and, but because, use visuals and sentence frames. So again, if you were using the poster, you could highlight some of the words on the very left-hand side, which would be our more beginner words, and then you would also give them sentence frames with those to help them. For our intermediate EAL level 3 and 4 students, you could introduce variety in function. So instead of always only using and, but, or because, we could think about other words that we could use and try and only use a cohesive device once in their writing or in their speaking and try to use a different one the next time. So however, therefore, in addition, and you could model usage in short texts. And then for our advanced EAL level 5 students, we would teach nuance and register formal versus informal connectors and then academic phrases. So again, this is the part where we're really focusing on that academic rigor and giving students the skills in order to find success in those classes that require the more possibly formal and also very academic terms. So just going through some scaffolding techniques, we have touched on these briefly in our previous section, but again, sentence frames and sentence starters are always a good way to model and allow students to access. So I think blank because blank, and students could fill in the blanks, and then they could then say that sentence out loud as a way to practice using them. On the other hand, comma, and then finish a sentence there. So color coding, highlight connectors in text by function, cause, effect, contrast, addition. And again, this does not need to be prepared prior. If you have a sentence written on the board or you're projecting something, you could just highlight it as you go and or ask students to point them out to you and then they could highlight it. It's just making students aware that we're already seeing them everywhere and you're already using them and just bringing their attention to it. Word banks are always a great idea. And inside of word banks, you could include cohesive devices there and say, I'd love for you to pick one of these cohesive devices and use it in your presentation today. Chunking tasks, start with combining 2 sentences and build up to full paragraphs. So if we are starting by just taking 2 short sentences, combining it into 1 sentence using a cohesive device, and then think about how we could embed all of those throughout a full paragraph. The next one is visual support, so the use of flowcharts or concept maps to show relationships, and then a gradual release. It's always important to know that scaffolding should be gradually released as the students become more independent. So at first we may need to model, we may need to give them extensive sentence frames, we may need to show them many times so that they can start building that skill. That may move to just guided practice. Say, hey, I see you did this. I'd like you to go back and I'd like you to add this now. And then lastly, independent use. They would no longer need the scaffolds in order to display this skill. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to move on, and I have 2 examples. I wanted to make sure that I was kind of hitting all the grade levels of those of you in attendance. And so we'll start with a grade 4 example. And I just went on the Alberta Assessment Consortium and I pulled off a performance task for grades 4, and it's for science ELAL, and it's a natural resource experts task introduction. So now I know on the screen it's very small. I did include the links in my email, but I am just going to read the task introduction just so you can hear it. So you know that what we're talking about here. And then we'll go through each of the tasks on this assignment, and just how you could target cohesive devices on each section. So I will just read the task introduction for you. You have been invited to present as an expert at the Alberta Natural Resource Convention. To be an expert on the importance of natural resources in Alberta, you will need to further investigate the different resources used daily to meet the needs of humans. To accomplish this task, you'll work alongside your fellow researchers and use various sources of information to expand your knowledge of natural resources and how they are essential to our survival. At the convention, you will ethically present your findings, describe how a natural resource is used to meet the needs of humans, and cite the sources of information you use to inform your research. Let's get started. Okay, so it's kind of a little research project, and then students are going to present their findings to their peers. So for task 1, the directions were to start your research on natural resources by reading the Alberta Natural Resource Guide to Natural Resources. That's an interesting name. So for task 1, if we wanted to explicitly target some work with cohesive devices, we could ask students, can you highlight connectors in the guide? So if when the students are doing their research and reading, do they find any of the cohesive devices in the guide that they're reading? Color code, and then we could also, higher level would be to color code cohesive devices by function. Is this an addition cohesive device, a contrast, or a cause and effect? And again, the students could have the cohesive device poster beside them, and they could use it and say, hey, I wonder if I could find any in this guide. So there's one way on that task how you could use them. And then task number 2 is the brainstorming uses. So your research coordinator will provide you with a sample of each of the following natural resources to analyze, and then your task will be to examine these samples and brainstorm with your group of researchers about how you will use these natural resources in your daily life. So for this part, use sentence starters for discussion. In addition to that, on the other hand, as a result, and the activity group discussion where students must use at least 2 connectors when sharing ideas. So again, it's really valuable to provide sentence starters for students when they're speaking. It allows them to learn to use that more academic language. And so if you just wrote up a few sentence starters on the board and said, hey, when you're sharing inside your group, I'd like you to start and say, in addition to that, on the other hand, or as a result, so that students can practice using those cohesive devices in speaking. It'd be nice too in the brainstorming section to do that because it'd be a little bit of a safer place, a smaller group, they're maybe working with their peers. So again, a more safe place to practice using those words. So task number 3 is the research section. So for this part, teach note-taking with cohesive phrases. This resource is important because it is used in many ways, for example. So if we're guiding students on how you'd like to record what you have found in your research, we could give them some sentence starters here. And also provide sentence frames for summarizing the sources. Okay, and now we come to the presentation part. For this part, we could structure the findings with cohesive devices. Maybe they're presenting with some slides and you could say, okay, what I'd like you to put here is for your first slide, you could say, first, I found blah, blah, blah. Next, I found, and then at the end, in conclusion, and therefore, blah, blah, blah. So again, just encouraging students by providing them some direction on the types of vocabulary you want them speaking, using, and also writing. And then task 5 is the convention sharing. So this part encourages peer feedback, and we could encourage our feedback to be using cohesive devices. So maybe the audience would have some feedback sentence starters and say, if you'd like to give feedback, I'd like you to start with, I agree with your point because, or I do not agree with your point because. And so then again, practice using those cohesive devices. And then also peer review checklist. Did the presenter use connectors for clarity? So it could even be like a little game and say, oh man, that group used, I had my cohesive device poster and I heard them say 5 of the words on this poster. That's amazing. So there's a way you could do it with that one. Okay, so now we're going to move on to a grade 10 social studies task. So I'll read the assessment task first, and again, this is from the Alberta Assessment Consortium. So this is a globalization newspaper. So you recently interviewed for one of 2 positions as a cub reporter in a regional newspaper. You've been offered the job and have been told that you will be moving to a community that is largely populated by either the Lubicon Cree, Northern Alberta, or the Akaitcho Dene First Nation in the Northwest Territories. You get to choose which of these communities you would like to move to. One of your first tasks as cub reporter will be to help to create an issue of the local newspaper that addresses the impact of globalization on the First Nations group in your new community. You will be researching and writing about either the Lubicon Cree or the Akaitcho Dene First Nation, depending on which community you choose. So in the introduction to the task here, you will explain the purpose using connectors like because, therefore, as a result. So you could even find these connectors inside of the activity. You could model an example introduction. So we are creating a newspaper issue about globalization because it impacts First Nations community. Therefore, understanding these effects helps readers make informed decisions. Next, you'll move on to the news articles. So use cohesive devices to show cause and effect, contrast, and addition. So examples, you could give them as well. Like we have that reference poster. Students could have that at their desk. And then you could also provide sentence frames. Globalization has affected the Lubicon Cree because ... As a result, the community has experienced ... So again, just modeling how we want students to speak and how we want them to connect their ideas. Next, we have the editorial section, which is to teach persuasive language with cohesive devices for reasoning. So on the other hand, globalization brings challenges, therefore solutions must include. So the activity is to give linking phrases for opinions, in my view, as a result, on the other hand, and then peer review could check for connectors that strengthen arguments. Also, a portion of this task is to write some photo captions. Again, great way to target this in just a little bit of a different way. Use connectors to explain the impact. So this image shows deforestation. As a result, wildlife habitats have been reduced. Okay, and next we have a portion of this task was related to a map. So use cohesive phrases to describe relationships. So the map shows the Akaitcho Dene territory. Because of increased mining, the land has changed significantly. And then lastly, the presentation. So this would be the big part related to using cohesive devices when they are speaking. So it would structure the oral presentation with cohesive devices. So first, next, in conclusion, therefore, and provide a word bank for sequencing and cause and effect connectors. So provide them with what you're looking for and how they can do well in their presentation would be related to ensuring that they've connected their ideas well, which is through cohesive devices. And I just wanted to make note as well, I know that for the social studies diploma exams, that part of the rubric for the written response on the diploma is specific to cohesive devices. So these are skills, again, that need to be explicitly taught for all students in our classes and will help them to do better, for example, on their diploma exam as well. So just wanted to bring that up. So I hope you found those examples of lessons and how you could easily, and again, those don't need to be things that are prepared beforehand. They're just things that you're pointing out as you're working through the material. So I just wanted to conclude kind of all the things that we spoke about here. So first of all, that cohesive devices are used to increase clarity and flow in our speaking and writing. And then number two, it's really important that we're teaching them explicitly. We need to model them, highlight them, and practice them as much as we can. And that scaffolds for EAL learners or any students in your class who require extra support are always beneficial and helpful to all students. So start simple, and then we can build with complexity and also pull away those scaffolds as students don't need them anymore. Cohesive devices are the use of them and the understanding of them is much better if it's used across all subject areas. So if you're in teaching in an elementary class and you teach all subjects, it's try to incorporate them into all the subjects that you teach. I know for students in junior high and high school where they see multiple different teachers, I mean, you can do what you can in your class, but encourage use of them in all subjects. And then if cohesive devices are visible and practical and used frequently, they're more likely to be used moving forward. And I just wanted to share a few resources. And again, these are all linked on the PDF of the slides that I sent you. Our amazing math curriculum team has a document with math talk sentence starters. So if you're teaching math and you're wondering how you can incorporate cohesive devices in your math class, there's some examples of sentence starters here. And then there's an academic language toolkit. I just took a snip of one section. If you're wanting to use more sentence frames and sentence starters in your class to help model for students, this document has tons of great examples. So yeah, feel free to access that again on the PDF, and I think my coworker is putting them in the chat as well. Thank you. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to get my coworker here to stop the recording so